Oh yeah, look at how tender that meat is. It's basically just falling apart. You want to make riz of fasoolya or rice and green beans. First thing you want to do is you want to grab yourself a nice piece of meat. Here I have a pound of chuck roast, and we're just going to slice it into even pieces. All right, and if you have any pieces that have a little too much fat on it, you can go ahead and trim that. Not trying to eat a mouthful of fat. Okay, anything that's betwixt all the meat, that's fine. Right, so we're looking for pieces that are, you know, not bite-sized, bigger than bite-sized, because these are gonna fall apart. Next thing we wanna do is we'll prep our green beans. I've got a pound of meat, so I'm gonna use 2 pounds of green beans. So this one, maybe 3 pieces I'll do. And I'll just take your paring knife and 1, okay, 3 pieces. Aha, see? You really don't wanna be eating this right here, okay? This bag says it's already snipped, but clearly not all of them are. So just grab your knife and take that end right off. And you're just gonna repeat for all your green beans. This is a point where you'd wanna put some music on or something. In Syria, these actually, if you've heard of string beans, they would have a string all along the back here. And so whenever this dish was prepped, you'd have to trim the ends and then literally pull out a long, inedible fibrous string all across the entire length of the green bean or string bean. Nowadays, thanks to, you know, science and stuff like that, you can get your green beans without that inedible string down the length. Alrighty, here's our prepped green beans. Here's our prepped meat. We're gonna brown our meat. You definitely want to hear that sizzle when you drop the meat in. See that coloration, that browning compared to this one? That's that browning we're looking for. Exactly like that, brown your meat. All right, brought this over here so that we can get a good look at the camera. You can see the meat has browned nicely from the top. So we're gonna go ahead and add about a cup, 16 tablespoons of tomato paste. Be very generous with your tomato paste because this is the basis of the broth. The only thing you want to be mindful of is the salt content. I'm only adding a teaspoon of salt for this whole dish so far. Okay, I got a pound of meat, I got 2 pounds of vegetables. We're gonna add in about 8 cups of water, but I'm only adding a teaspoon of salt. Okay, the reason for that is the tomato paste has salt in it, and depending on which tomato paste you use, the amount of salt varies. So we're gonna be very conservative with our levels of salt right now. Later on, we're gonna go ahead and taste, and then we can add more salt to the broth if needed. And you can always add more salt. Unfortunately, you can't take out salt once you've added it into the dish. I've also got a teaspoon of baharat, which is mixed Syrian spices. You're gonna have all of these brown bits of meat at the bottom, and you wanna go ahead and add a little bit of water in here to start with, and you wanna try and scrape all that in, right? Scrape all the brown bits of meat. We're gonna wanna add that to our broth. That's where half the flavor of the meat comes from. Brown the meat, scrape the brown bits back into the broth. I've got my meat and the tomato paste along with 8 cups of water in here. All that's left is to add the green beans. We're gonna bring this up to a boil and then reduce to a simmer for about an hour and a half. Our green beans have come up to a boil. So we're gonna turn down the fire so that we can get a nice simmer going. So what I mean by simmer is the liquid should just be barely popping, barely bubbling. While our meat and green beans come up to a simmer, I'm gonna go ahead and show you the last 2 ingredients we're going to add at the very end. First is cilantro. Kind of slice at an angle, trying to avoid these stems. Cilantro stems aren't too bad, but don't really wanna eat any stems personally. Roll this up and slice. And just give it a rough chop. Once you got your garlic peeled, you can go ahead and slice it thinly. So just come down and protect with the knuckle. Last thing you want to do, after it's simmered for an hour and a half, add the cilantro and garlic, let it simmer for another 10 minutes, serve over vermicelli rice. And you've got yourself riz of fasoolya. Sahtin. You can see the broth is nice and tomatoey, and the meat is just Oh yeah, look at how tender that meat is. It's basically just falling apart. Just remember, this is the finished product we're going for, and it's pretty good, so hang in there. Hang in there.